She was just the nanny, until the man of the house stood up for her in front of his wife. Some loves are born in silence, between commands and glances, between the forbidden and the inevitable. And sometimes love doesn't come to be lived, but to show the heart what it's capable of enduring. Rain poured over the mansion's garden. Clara was kneeling in the mud, her dress soiled, her hair clinging to her face. Helena, Eduardo's wife, shouted, "How dare you touch my son?" Then Eduardo appeared, cutting through the rain and the echo of fury. He took his wife's arm, steady and resolute. "That's enough, Helena. You've crossed the line." Silence fell like a curtain. The boy watched from the stairs, trembling, and Clara, her eyes cast down, felt something break and something else begin. But she didn't know yet that everything would begin at that exact moment. The day unfolded slowly, like so many others. A grey sky blanketed São Paulo, and the wet streets mirrored the hurried glow of passing headlights. Clara Monteiro walked the sidewalk with the weight of time pressing down on her shoulders. She carried a folded resume in her bag and a warped umbrella the wind kept turning inside out. Her hands trembled, not from cold, but from anxiety. She had been searching for work for weeks. Her last job, at a small neighborhood daycare, had ended badly. An unfair accusation, an influential mother, and everything she had built was undone in a single afternoon. The word dismissed still echoed in her mind like an invisible stamp. That morning, a newspaper ad had felt like an improbable chance. Traditional family seeking full-time nanny, must be discreet, patient, and have references. Clara had no references, only the urgency of need. She took 2 buses to reach the given address. The neighborhood was another world. Tall houses, walls with cameras, perfectly manicured gardens. When the driver announced the final stop, she got off and stood there, staring at the street like someone witnessing a place too far removed from her reality. She took a deep breath, straightened her worn coat, and walked to the Ferraz mansion's gate. It opened remotely. A woman in a dark uniform greeted her with a look that blended suspicion and curiosity. "Hear about the ad?" "Yes, I'm Clara Monteiro." "Come in." "Mrs. Helena will see you." Inside, the house was spacious, quiet, with a faint scent of expensive flowers, the kind of place where even footsteps seemed to ask for permission. Helena Ferraz appeared at the top of the stairs, a beautiful, flawless woman wrapped in a coldness that needed no introduction. "Leave your resume on the table," she said without a greeting. "Interviews will be brief. I don't have much time." Clara obeyed, trying to mask her nerves. The questions came fast and sharp, as if Helena was simply hunting for a flaw to dismiss her. "Do you have children?" "No." "Willing to stay overnight?" "Yes, if needed." "Do you smoke?" "No." Helena jotted something down on a piece of paper. "And why did you leave your last job?" Clara hesitated. "It was a misunderstanding." "Misunderstandings," Helena repeated without looking up. "That sort of thing tends to happen when people get too close to their employers." The words cut like a blade. Clara swallowed hard but kept her composure. Helena stood, gathered the papers, and said only, "We'll be in touch if necessary." Clara thanked her and left. The door shut behind her with the finality of a sentence. Outside, the rain had thickened again. She walked with her head down, distracted, when she heard a shout. Suddenly, a car sped through the street ahead. A small red ball rolled across the road. A boy chased after it, unaware. Clara reacted before she could think. She dropped her bag, sprinted, and pulled the child back onto the sidewalk. The car screeched past. The sound of tires lingered in her ears before fading into silence. The boy was shaking. She wrapped her arms around him instinctively. "It's okay, it's over now." Hurried footsteps approached from behind. A man in a dark suit rushed toward them, his face tense, his eyes urgent. "Lucas!" The boy ran to him. The man quickly checked his son, then turned to Clara. His gaze was steady, direct, but clouded, like he was still trying to piece together what had happened. "You pulled him from the street?" "Yes, he was chasing after the ball." The man exhaled, knelt, and embraced his son. You saved my boy. Clara smiled, still catching her breath. I just did what anyone would have done. Not everyone would, he replied, standing up. He was tall, with strong features and a quiet kind of authority, commanding but without arrogance. I'm Eduardo Ferraz. She blinked, surprised. Ferraz? Yes. Seems you've just met my son. He extended his hand. And you are? Clara Montero. For a moment silence stretched between them. The rain sounded muffled, as if time itself had slowed. Eduardo glanced around, then turned back to her. You're soaked. Come inside. Clara hesitated. I don't want to intrude. Joyce, you're intruding if you stay out here. She followed him through the gate. As they crossed the garden again, the moment felt surreal. Less than an hour ago, she had walked away from this place, certain she'd never return. And now, she was entering once more. This time beside the man who owned it. Helena appeared on the veranda, her face drained of color at the sight. Clara, her son, and her husband. What is the meaning of this, Eduardo? He replied without changing his tone. It means your son was nearly run over, and this young woman saved him. Helena stepped down a stair, not hiding her discomfort. Oh, is that so? Yes. And who is she? The candidate you dismissed less than an hour ago. The silence that followed seemed to echo through the entire house. Helena looked from Clara to her husband, then to the boy, still clinging tightly to the nanny's hand. Eduardo noticed and added, It seems fate decided to do the hiring for us. Helena kept her polite smile. As you wish, Eduardo. She turned and walked back inside, the sound of her heels echoing across the marble floor. Eduardo turned to Clara. Looks like we have a position to fill, Miss Montero. She blinked, stunned. Are you serious? I never joke with someone who saved what's most precious to me. And that was how Clara crossed the gates of the Ferraz mansion once more, no longer as an applicant, but as the new nanny to a boy still trembling, and to a family she had no idea would shake her to the core. The wind stirred the garden trees as she stepped through the doorway. There was something different in the air, an uneasy stillness like the beginning of something no one yet had the name for. Fersiki, and the house was too large for the silence that lived in it. Clara noticed this on her very first night. Every footstep echoed. Every door seemed to guard a conversation abruptly ended. The air carried the faint scent of jasmine, mixed with something unnamed, perhaps distance, perhaps loneliness. She was taken to a small room near the garden, simple but spotless. On the neatly made bed lay a freshly folded uniform and a note from the housekeeper. Be punctual. Staff meals are at 6. Clara sat and stared at the uniform for several minutes. It was the first time in a long while that she had a roof over her head and a steady paycheck. But instead of relief, she felt a strange unease. Everything in that house felt too controlled, too immaculate, like joy had been dusted away along with the furniture. The next morning she met Lucas again, this time in a different light. A 6-year-old boy with watchful eyes and uncertain gestures, seated at a massive table, his plate untouched. She tried a gentle smile. Hi, Lucas. Did you sleep well? He nodded, avoiding eye contact. Your juice is right there, she said softly, and the bread is still warm. The boy remained silent. The housekeeper, watching from the doorway, whispered, He doesn't speak much. Ever since his parents started living like strangers, he's gone quiet. Clara studied the boy. There was something in his eyes that unsettled her, an adult kind of sadness, the look of someone who's seen more than they should. Eduardo appeared a few minutes later, suited up and rushing. He kissed the boy's head. Do well at school, okay? Lucas simply nodded. As Eduardo turned to leave, he met Clara's gaze for the first time since the accident. It was brief, but something in it lingered. She lowered her eyes, self-conscious. He gave a subtle nod and left. The housekeeper noticed. Careful, she murmured while collecting the cups. Even glances have owners here. Clara didn't reply. She pretended not to understand, but the words lodged somewhere deep within her. The days passed slowly. Lucas gradually began to let her in. He liked when Clara told him stories before bed. She created worlds, kingdoms, and quiet heroes who won without swords, and without realizing, she began to fill the space that had been far too empty. One afternoon, while playing in the garden, the boy fell and scraped his knee. Clara knelt and gently cleaned the wound. That's when she noticed Eduardo watching from the veranda. He said nothing, just watched, not with suspicion, but with the gaze of someone trying to remember what tenderness felt like. She felt the weight of that gaze and instinctively looked away, but he remained there a few seconds longer, quietly observing, as if the simple image of the two of them together offered him a moment's reprieve from his own exhaustion. And that evening, over dinner, Helena made a point of reminding her husband about the upcoming charity event they were attending together. "Everyone will be there," she said, as if reciting a rehearsed line. "It'll be good for the company's image." Eduardo only nodded. Clara, pouring the wine, noticed how Helena looked at him. It wasn't love, it was possession. The way she called him darling felt more like a warning than affection. Later, as Clara retreated to the kitchen, she overheard part of the conversation drifting from the dining room. Helena said something about appearances. Eduardo replied, his voice low. "Sometimes I prefer silence over facades." Clara felt her cheeks flush. She didn't know why, but that sentence stayed with her. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm. Eduardo left early, returned late. Helena was absorbed in social events and meetings with wealthy friends, and Clara unknowingly became the center of Lucas's small universe. One evening after school, Lucas brought home a drawing, himself, Clara, and Eduardo, holding hands in the garden. Helena found it lying on the table. She called Clara into the office and held up the picture. "Do you know what this means?" "It's just a drawing, Mom." "To you, maybe. To me, this is the kind of thing that tears families apart." Clara's heart began to pound. "I would never—" she began. But Helena cut her off. "Spare me the explanation. Just remember your place in this house." She left, leaving only silence behind. Later that evening, Eduardo returned. Clara was still in the kitchen. He noticed something in her expression. "Is everything all right?" She hesitated. "Just a misunderstanding." He seemed to understand more than she had said. In this house, misunderstandings usually have a name. His eyes were calm, but carried something that disarmed her. Compassion mixed with curiosity. For a fleeting moment, Clara wanted to believe she could trust him, but she remembered the housekeeper's warning and looked away. "I'll turn in. Good night, sir." Eduardo simply replied, "Good night, Clara." The sound of her name on his lips was different, firm, yet kind. As he climbed the stairs, Clara remained where she stood, trying to understand why that voice, among so many that had told her to be quiet, felt like the only one that made her truly listen. In her room, the night stretched on. Clara lay down, but sleep didn't come. Outside, the wind rattled the windows, stirring memories she wished she could forget. She thought about the daycare, about the mother who falsely accused her, and the fear of losing everything again. And for a moment, she felt that this house could be a haven, or another collapse waiting to happen. Downstairs, in the darkened living room, Eduardo was still awake. A glass of whiskey in hand, his gaze fixed on the garden. From the upper floor, the light from Clara's room cast a soft glow on the window pane. And he knew, though he couldn't explain how, that this woman was about to change the rhythm of his days. At midnight, the lights went out. The house slept. But fate, in its quiet way, was already wide awake. The weeks that followed were filled with a tense kind of balance. Clara was adjusting to the household rhythm, but each day brought new gestures, new glances, new silences that kept her alert. The air felt thick, as if something was about to shift, though no one could name it yet. Eduardo remained reserved, yet his behavior toward her began to change, subtly. Not in words, but in small actions, the kind that nearly go unnoticed. He started checking if she had eaten, quietly asking how Lucas was doing, listening without hurry, as his son recounted their afternoons in the garden. Clara, without realizing it, began to smile more when he was around. A quiet, restrained smile, like someone trying to hide a habit newly formed. She tried to contain it, but his eyes always seemed to find her, even when she pretended not to look. The one morning, Lucas woke with a fever. Helena was away and the housekeeper had errands to run. Clara was left alone with the boy. She tried to bring the fever down with cold compresses, made him tea, and sat beside his bed reading stories as he dozed off between soft sighs. When Eduardo returned, it was late afternoon. He found Clara asleep in the armchair, the book still open on her lap, the boy resting peacefully. She looked exhausted, her hair falling loosely over her shoulder, her face lit by the tender light of the setting sun. For a moment, Eduardo just stood there watching. There was a quiet tenderness in that room, something he hadn't seen in years, something long forgotten within himself. He took a step forward, and the creak of the floorboard woke Clara. She straightened quickly, flustered. "I'm sorry, sir, I didn't mean—" "It's all right," he interrupted softly. "You don't have to explain." His eyes met hers and lingered too long. There was something in that moment that neither dared to name. The silence between them felt nearly tangible. Eduardo looked away first. "Thank you for taking care of him." Clara nodded, unable to speak. When he left the room, the air felt different. She stayed there, still trying to make sense of what she felt. Was it fear, curiosity, or perhaps the memory of a kind of affection she thought she no longer deserved? That night, the rain came hard. The sound of water on the roof filled the house. Clara went down to the kitchen to fetch a glass of water. The dim light from a single lamp cast long shadows across the walls. Eduardo was there, seated at the table, reviewing documents. She paused in the doorway. "Sorry, I didn't know anyone was here." "It's fine. Want some coffee?" he asked, standing. She shook her head. "I don't want to intrude." "You'd intrude more by leaving now." He said it with a light smile, the first she'd truly seen. His expression softened, and for a brief instant, the businessman disappeared, replaced by someone more human. She sat at the opposite end of the table. The sound of the rain felt like a protective barrier, as if the outside world had faded. "Do you always work this late?" she asked, just to break the silence. "Numbers are easier than people," he replied, pouring himself coffee. "They don't lie. They don't need explanations." Clara studied him, trying to understand what lay behind the calm surface. "But numbers don't love," she said, almost without realizing. He looked at her. His gaze was steady, intense. "And maybe that's what makes them predictable." Clara turned her face away, pretending to study the cup in her hand. "Predictability is what never changes," she murmured. "And you don't seem to like change. Depends on the reason. And sometimes the reason is just someone who reminds us of what we've forgotten." The silence that followed was long. The rain had softened, and the ticking of the clock filled the air. Eduardo looked at her again, and this time there was no curiosity in his eyes. There was recognition, as if somehow he saw himself reflected in the way she looked at him. "Good night, Clara," he said at last, gathering his papers. "Good night, sir," she replied, almost a whisper. After he left, the coffee on the table grew cold. Clara remained seated, unmoving, trying to understand what this man was awakening within her. It wasn't desire. It was something more dangerous. Trust. Tres Carillas. In the days that followed, Helena returned. Clara immediately noticed the shift in temperature inside the house. Her presence changed the air, like a cold current rushing into a warm room. Helena spoke loudly, laughed with an artificial tone, and every phrase carried a veiled threat. During dinner, Clara was serving the table when Helena remarked, without looking directly, "I heard our little one didn't want to sleep without the nanny." Eduardo replied, eyes still on his plate, "He trusts her. It's good to see him at peace." Helena set her cutlery down. "Does he trust her, or do you?" The question dripped with venom. Eduardo looked up but kept his voice steady. Careful, Helena. You're crossing a dangerous line. I just want to know what's going on in my house. Maybe you should start with yourself. The silence that followed was heavy. Clara continued serving, pretending not to hear, but her hands trembled. She could feel Helena's gaze burning into her back. In the days that followed, Helena began testing boundaries. She assigned Clara unnecessary tasks, changed schedules arbitrarily, invented reasons to criticize. But Eduardo, little by little, began to intervene, always subtly. He would correct his wife, defend Clara without raising his voice. He didn't do it to challenge anyone, he did it for justice. And each time he did, Clara felt a mix of gratitude and unease. One afternoon, Helena left for an event, and the house fell into silence. Lucas played in the garden, and Eduardo came down from his office. He found Clara tending to the plants, lost in thought. She didn't notice him approach. "You like flowers?" he asked. She jumped, startled, then turned. "I do. They remind me that even small things can take root if they're cared for." He smiled faintly. "Maybe I should learn from them." "Fuse, you have a whole garden, but you never stop to look at it." Her comment caught him off guard. For a moment he truly pondered it. "Maybe I'm afraid of what I'll see." Clara watched him silently. The wind rustled the leaves, and the sounds of the world felt far away. It was a simple moment, but heavy with something neither of them dared to name. Eduardo stepped closer. "Clara, sometimes I wonder, what would have happened if you hadn't saved Lucas that day?" She looked at him, steady. "Maybe you wouldn't have noticed me, or maybe nothing would be the same." His eyes lingered on hers. The space between them seemed to shrink without either of them moving. Clara took a deep breath and stepped back slightly. "I should finish before Mrs. Helena returns." Eduardo nodded quietly. "Of course." He turned back toward the house. Clara remained in the garden, her heart racing. The scent of the flowers was suddenly overwhelming, and the silence far too full of meaning. The fragile balance within the Ferraz household was as delicate as a thread of crystal. All it took was a spark for the cracks to begin. In the days that followed, Helena began to see what she had long pretended not to notice. The glances shared between Clara and Eduardo, the silences that lingered too long between one good night and the next, the subtle shift in his voice when he spoke to the nanny. There was nothing she could point to as evidence, but something far more painful than proof. For the first time in years, her husband seemed alive. Helena could not bear to be forgotten. She didn't know how to love, but she knew how to dominate. And for her, domination was a way of existing. That Friday, the house buzzed with preparations for the annual charity dinner, a polished event that gathered businessmen, politicians, and close family friends. As always, Helena was flawless, meticulous in every detail. Clara helped with the floral arrangements in the hall, doing her best to avoid any direct contact. Eduardo spent the day in meetings, and Lucas had been sent to stay with a relative. By late afternoon, Clara went upstairs to prepare the guest room. While changing the linens, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Eduardo was standing in the doorway. "I thought you'd left," she said, startled. "Forgot a document." "And you?" "Just finishing the room for tomorrow." The sunlight filtered through the curtains, painting golden lines across the floor. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Eduardo watched her, a gaze caught somewhere between curiosity and restrained respect. "Helena should trust you more," he said. Clara smiled, but it was a fragile smile. "It's not about trust. It's about territory." He took a deep breath. "Clara, You don't need to say anything," she interrupted softly. "It's hard enough living here already." Eduardo stepped closer. "Hardship isn't an excuse to silence what we feel. Feeling doesn't mean we have the right. And who said I'm asking for rights?" She looked away. The air between them hung heavy. But before any word could be spoken, footsteps approached. Helena. She appeared in the doorway, eyes sharp. What a charming little scene. Eduardo stepped back calmly. There's nothing charming about it, Helena. Of course not. Just your tone changes when you talk to the nanny. Clara tried to speak. Ma'am, I was just... Helena raised her hand to silence her. No need to explain. I prefer to see with my own eyes. She left behind a trail of heavy perfume and a tension that now filled the room. Eduardo exhaled deeply. She's going to act, Clara said. I know. Then please, let me leave. He shook his head. No, you're not leaving. Why not? Because running is what she expects. Clara looked at him uncertain, but in his voice she heard a firmness that steadied her, and even without understanding, she stayed. And that night, the dinner began. Elegant guests, crystal glasses, carefully rehearsed laughter. Helena, stunning in a dark gown, carried the poise of someone who controls the stage. Clara served discreetly, following the protocol to perfection. But something in Helena's eyes betrayed a plan already in motion. She waited for the perfect moment, a lull between conversation and the first toast. Then she rose with a practiced smile. Before we end the evening, I'd like to thank the staff. She motioned for Clara to come forward. Clara, confused, obeyed. This is Clara, Helena announced to the room, our devoted nanny. The guests offered polite applause. Helena continued, her voice a touch louder. An exemplary young woman who cares for my son with such devotion. Sometimes perhaps a little too much. The words sliced through the air. A few guests chuckled quietly. Eduardo stared at Helena, stiff with anger. That's enough, Helena. No, darling. Just showing appreciation, she replied, savoring the cruelty in her tone. Clara stood still. Her hands trembled, her face burned, but she kept her chin raised. Not answering was the only defense she had left. Eduardo stood. That's enough. Helena let out a dry laugh. You're going to defend her in front of everyone, is that it? The room fell silent. Guests exchanged uneasy glances. Eduardo looked at his wife, voice unwavering. I'll defend whoever deserves it. And you think she deserves more than I do? At least she doesn't lie about how she feels. The words hit like a blade. Helena paled. The guests looked away, pretending not to hear. Eduardo turned to Clara. You may leave. She hesitated. Please, he added softly. Clara exited the room with measured steps, her breath short. When she reached her room, the tears came. Not from humiliation, but from the weight of being exposed for something she never asked for. At the next morning, the house was silent. Helena had gone out early. Eduardo knocked on Clara's door. She opened it slowly. I shouldn't have stayed last night, she said before he could speak. It wasn't your fault. It was. From the beginning, this house has felt like a mistake. He stepped closer. Sometimes mistakes are the only road to what's right. Clara looked at him, trying to make sense of his words. He looked tired, but in his eyes there was something tender, something weighed with guilt. I don't want to be the reason for a war, she murmured. Then let me fight for peace. For a moment, Clara considered stepping back, but didn't. They stood there, close enough to breathe the same air, to feel the same hesitation. And in the silence, the unspoken began to take shape. Eduardo lifted a hand, gently touching her face. It was a simple gesture, but it carried everything they hadn't dared to say. She closed her eyes, not brave enough to pull away, not strong enough to fully allow it. This is wrong, she whispered. It's human. But before she could answer, a door creaked upstairs. Helena had returned. The moment between them shattered, and what remained was not fear of being caught, but fear of admitting that something real had already begun. In the days that followed, Helena maintained a calculated silence, but her silence had always been more dangerous than her words. She began to move in secret, whispered phone calls, hushed conversations with the housekeeper, quiet instructions. Clara noticed the shift, the sideways glances from the staff, the sudden distance, the rumor that spread without a sound. The house was poisoned. and she was the target. One morning, she found an envelope on the table with her name on it. Inside, a brief note written by Helena. "We no longer require your services. The child will be cared for by family. Thank you for your time. Helena Ferraz." Clara stood still, staring at the words. The paper felt heavier than it should have. Eduardo arrived minutes later. "What happened?" She handed him the letter. "It's done." He read it, then tore it in half. "This won't happen. You can't stop it. I can, and I will." But Clara knew. In that house, Helena's will always had the final word. And for the first time, she didn't want to be defended, because every act of protection from Eduardo made things more dangerous. "I just want to leave," she said, eyes lowered. "Clara, please." Eduardo didn't respond. He just stood there, like someone watching the inevitable unfold. Clara packed in silence. As she passed through the hallway, Lucas ran to her and wrapped his arms around her legs. "You'll come back, won't you?" he asked, eyes glistening. She knelt, hugging him tightly. "I'll never stop thinking about you." As she stepped through the gate, the air felt lighter, but her heart heavier. From the upstairs window, Eduardo watched. Helena stood behind him and said coldly, "It's for the best." He said nothing, just closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, felt something inside him break. Silence has its own sound. It's what fills the space when words have no place left to go. In the weeks that followed, it was this sound that filled Clara's life. She had left the Ferraz estate without looking back. She carried with her a small suitcase, a handful of clothes, and the ache left by Lucas's goodbye. She found a modest room in an old boarding house near the city center. The noise of the city was constant, horns, voices, the distant rumble of the metro, but inside her, everything was still. Each morning, she walked crowded streets, searching job boards. In store windows, she sometimes saw her reflection and barely recognized it. The girl who had entered that mansion was gone. In her place stood a woman who had learned not to trust kindness that came too easily. At night, she made tea, sat on her bed, and listened to the wind against the window. She thought of Lucas, of Eduardo's touch, and tried to convince herself it had all been an illusion. But it wasn't. There had been something even time refused to erase. Across the city, the Ferraz house fell into a different kind of silence. Helena returned to her social circles, wearing her practiced smile, but something in her had grown harsher. Eduardo avoided dinners, avoided crowded rooms, avoided even his own reflection. Lucas asked for Clara every day. At first, Eduardo made excuses. "She's traveling. She'll be back." But each new lie grew heavier. One Sunday night, the boy cried himself to sleep. Eduardo sat beside his bed watching his son breathe. He felt the weight of every absence, the woman who never loved him, the child who had learned to stay quiet. The nanny who brought light and left, taking the last fragments of peace with her. That night he went to his office, opened the safe, and found an envelope. He recognized Helena's handwriting. He read slowly. The message was simple and cruel. "She's gone. I made sure to end this farce before it became a scandal. You should thank me." The paper crumpled in his fist. He walked to the window and stood in silence. The city slept, but his world was breaking all over again. Teosudziuida the next day, he went to his son's school, spoke to the teacher, asked if Clara had left any contact information. She hadn't. He tried the agency that had handled her hiring. Same answer. It was as if she had vanished. Days turned into weeks. Her name began to lose its sound but not its weight. He buried himself in work, but his thoughts always circled back to the same question. What if I'd had the courage to stop her from leaving? Sometimes he'd see a woman with brown hair crossing the street, and his heart would race, but it was never her. Clara eventually found temporary work at a small preschool on the east side. Her routine was simple: make snacks, organize toys, care for children. There, among giggles and little disasters, she found quiet comfort. But sometimes, when a boy played with a toy airplane, she'd think of Lucas. Think of the garden, the flowers, the sound of rain on glass. And always, she remembered Eduardo's eyes that didn't ask, didn't promise, but said something she still didn't know how to name. One afternoon, leaving school, Clara found the Ferraz housekeeper waiting on the sidewalk. Her face looked different, tired. "What are you doing here?" Clara asked. "I have something to tell you." They walked to a nearby cafe. The woman looked around before speaking. "Mrs. Helena fired you to humiliate you. Mr. Eduardo didn't know." "He didn't know. He found out later." "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I can't stand what's happening in that house. The boy cries every night, and the boss, he hasn't been the same since you left." Clara said nothing. She stared at her coffee growing cold. Inside her, a tangle of anger and longing. "It doesn't matter," she said finally. "Some things don't come back." Maybe not. But sometimes going back is the only way to close what's still open. The woman stood, left a slip of paper on the table and walked away. On it, just an address. Clara stared at that piece of paper for 2 days. On the third, she decided to go. Not out of hope, but out of a need to understand. It was a morning of soft rain. The mansion looked the same, but the garden was unkempt, the flowers lifeless. She knocked. A new maid answered, startled. "Mrs. Helena is traveling," she said hesitantly. "I'm not here to see Mrs. Helena." From the top of the stairs, his voice, "Clara." Eduardo descended slowly, unable to believe what he was seeing. She looked different, shorter hair, stronger eyes. He was silent for a moment, as if her presence alone proved there was still something worth saving. "I thought I'd never see you again," he said at last. "So did I." The sound of rain mixed with their breath. She stepped forward. "I didn't come to accuse, I just needed to understand." "So do I." He moved closer. "Helena sent you away without telling me. I only found out when it was too late." "It doesn't matter." "It does." She looked away. "You're still tied to her." "Tyson, but I'm tied to what's left." The silence between them was familiar, but now it carried something new. Exhaustion. No longer the silence of fear, but the silence of two people who had learned the cost of feeling. Clara took a deep breath. "I have to go. And if I ask you to stay?" "I can't." He nodded slowly. "Then at least let me thank you." She looked at him one last time. "For what?" "For reminding me what's real." Clara descended the steps, crossed the garden and disappeared into the rain. Eduardo remained on the porch watching until her image dissolved into the fog. Inside, the house was quiet, the same silence, now deeper, now honest. That night, Clara wandered through the city. Streetlights shimmered in puddles, and the cold air brought a strange sense of relief. She no longer felt fear nor hope, only peace. And sometimes peace is all that remains once love has said everything it came to say. It was 11 o'clock when she returned to the boarding house. In her room, she turned on the light, opened the window, and let the wind in. On the table, the piece of paper with the address was now crumpled, damp from the rain. She tore it slowly, small, deliberate pieces, and dropped them into the trash. The past at last felt like a book whose final chapter had been written, but destiny, as always, had one more page tucked away. As time passed gently, almost politely, as if asking permission before touching each memory. Months blurred into a year. Life, little by little, reshaped itself, not because the wounds had healed, but because they had learned how to ache more quietly. Clara was still at the school, loved by the children, respected by her peers, and for the first time in a long time, she felt she belonged somewhere. Yet even surrounded by children's voices and drawings on the walls, the past would return at times, not as pain, but as a memory unwilling to fade. Eduardo, meanwhile, had become a different man. Helena had filed for divorce months after Clara left. Their marriage, sustained only by routine, ended in silence and cold paperwork. She moved to Europe without looking back. He stayed, with the house, the child, and what was left of his dignity. Lucas had grown, but Clara's absence remained a quiet shadow in his life. Eduardo could tell, even if the boy didn't understand it, the loss had found a quiet corner in his heart. It was then, urged by a friend, that Eduardo agreed to attend a charity lecture on childhood education. Ironically, the same event that included a presentation by the school where Clara now worked. The auditorium was wide and softly lit. On stage, banners with words like empathy and future. Eduardo entered quietly, greeted the hosts and sat near the front. While the speaker introduced the event, Eduardo glanced around, half distracted, until a name echoed through the room. Please welcome Assistant Teacher Clara Montero, presenting the project Children in Silence. His body reacted before his mind could. His eyes scanned the stage, and for a moment, everything around him seemed to vanish. It was her. Clara climbed the steps slowly, her hair pinned up, her gaze steady. She was no longer the unsure woman he had known. There was something new in her now. Something time builds when pain becomes a scar instead of a wound. She began to speak, and his soul recognized her voice before the words. She spoke of shy children, of learning to listen to what isn't said, of silence as a form of expression. Each sentence, each pause, revealed the wisdom of someone who had learned to hear what life whispers between the lines. Eduardo listened, motionless, his heart tight. The audience applauded, but he barely noticed the sound. All he saw was the contrast between the woman who left and the woman now standing on that stage, whole, rooted, peaceful. When the lecture ended, he waited for the crowd to thin. He stood, crossed the hall, and stopped at the dressing room door. His hand hesitated before knocking. Inside, Clara was gathering papers into a folder. Hearing the sound, she called out distractedly, "Come in." When she looked up, the air seemed to thicken. For a moment, neither knew what to say. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said at last. "Neither did I," he replied quietly. The silence between them had changed. It held no tension, just the soft weight of everything left unsaid. "You look well," Eduardo said. It sounded more like a truth than a question. "I am," she replied. "And you?" "Trying." She nodded gently without bitterness. "I heard about the divorce. It was what had to be done. I'm sorry." "Don't be. Some losses set us free." He stepped closer, still at a respectful distance. "I thought about you often." She looked away. "Time is kind to those who learn to wait, but cruel to those who insist on remembering. So you still remember?" "Sometimes." She smiled softly. "But it doesn't hurt anymore." Eduardo drew a slow breath. "It took me a long time to understand that what happened between us wasn't a mistake. It wasn't, but it happened at the wrong time. And what if now is the right time?" Clara met his gaze, and for the first time there was tenderness, not fear. "The right time doesn't depend on the clock. It depends on us. Do you still believe in us?" "I believe that if anything survived, it wasn't love. It was respect. And maybe that's stronger." He smiled, a little sad, but peaceful. "Then let me offer you what I couldn't before. Peace." Her eyes welled up. "I've already found it, but I'm glad to know you're searching too." For a moment, they simply looked at each other. There was no need for touch, no need for promises. The reunion itself was the quietest form of forgiveness. Clara picked up her folder, ready to leave. Before stepping out, she turned back. "Tell Lucas I'm happy for him. Tell him he'd love to see you. Maybe one day when it feels natural." Eduardo nodded. "Take care of yourself, Clara." "I've learned how." She walked out, and he stood still, watching the door close slowly behind her. Outside, the sound of her footsteps echoed down the hallway, like the closing notes of a long and necessary song. But that night, Clara walked to the bus stop. The sky was clear, the air crisp. The city lights no longer felt threatening. She sat watching cars pass. In the glass panel beside her, she saw her reflection. She was no longer the woman who waited to be saved. She had learned to save herself. And deep down, that's what Eduardo had taught her, without even knowing it, that no love is worth the loss of oneself. Across the city, he entered his son's room. Lucas slept, cradling the same toy airplane. Eduardo sat at the edge of the bed, ran his hand through the boy's hair, and stayed there, in silence. The faint sound of rain began to tap the roof, and for a moment everything felt like the beginning again. But something was different now. The weight of the past felt bearable. He closed his eyes, and Clara's face returned to him, not as absence, but as a memory of something good, and he finally understood that sometimes the truest love is the one that doesn't need to be lived to be real. Time moved forward like footsteps over dry leaves, soft, unhurried. Years passed, and with them, the urgency to understand everything faded. Clara no longer searched for answers. She simply continued. Life, at last, had learned to walk without stumbling. She remained at the school, now as a program coordinator. Her mornings began with children's laughter, the smell of paint, and a sense of purpose that ran deeper than words. Sometimes, watching the children, she noticed something about their silence. It was no longer fear. It was focus, not loneliness, but imagination, and she felt proud to have helped so many little ones find their voice. Her apartment was modest, tastefully simple, books stacked on shelves, vases filled with dried flowers. Her world was calm. Even her gaze carried a softness that time had never managed to harden. But there were days, rare, fleeting, when the past whispered. A scent, a sudden rain, the echo of a name she hadn't spoken in years. In those moments, she breathed deeply and let it pass. Not from indifference, but from reverence for what once was. One autumn afternoon, the school hosted a special event, a book and art fair to raise funds. Parents, students, alumni wandered through the decorated stalls. Clara reviewed the activities list when a familiar sound caught her ear, a child's laugh, softer than the others, but full of life. She looked up and saw him. Lucas, taller now, his brown hair tousled. At 10, he still held that same quiet sweetness. But there was something new in him, confidence. Beside him, a man browsed books thoughtfully. Eduardo. Time had changed him too. His features were gentler, his eyes at ease. He dressed simply and watched his son with the quiet devotion of a man who had finally learned to be present. Clara stood still, not frozen, just full. Her heart didn't race. It simply opened, recognizing something familiar and embracing it. Lucas saw her first. He stopped, looked, and smiled. Wide, open, pure. The same smile she remembered from the 6-year-old who once feared sleeping alone. He ran to her without hesitation. Clara. She knelt, enveloping him in a long, wordless hug. His taller frame still carried the same warmth. When they pulled apart, he asked, "Do you still remember me?" She laughed softly. "How could I forget?" Eduardo approached slowly. Clara stood. For a moment, they just looked at each other. There was no pain, no regret, only understanding. "He insisted on coming," Eduardo said, almost smiling. "Said he wanted to see you." Clara looked at the boy. "He's grown so much." "It's his fault," Eduardo said, his voice steady. "He teaches more than he learns." Lucas took her hand. "I still have the drawing, you know." "Which one?" "The garden, the 3 of us." She nodded, moved. "I'm glad you kept it." For a few seconds they stood quietly, watching the fair bustle around them. The breeze carried the scent of trees from the courtyard. Eduardo broke the silence. I heard your project was nominated for an award. It's a team effort, not mine alone. Still, congratulations. She nodded in thanks. Time between them had changed, no longer the time of interrupted passion, but of quiet peace, and that was enough. Lucas was called by a group of friends and dashed toward the stalls. Clara and Eduardo remained. He breathed in. You look happy. I am. You deserve to be. She looked at him, her expression soft. And you? I've learned to live with silence. Silence isn't absence, Eduardo. Sometimes it's just the space between who we were and who we're becoming. He nodded. Maybe that's true. They stood a moment longer, surrounded by children's laughter, the rustle of leaves, sunlight glinting off school windows. Everything felt in balance. When Lucas returned, he held a book. Can I ask for an autograph? He grinned. Clara laughed. I'm not an author. But you wrote my favorite story. She took the book and wrote on the first page, To Lucas, who taught me that love can be silence too. She returned the book and said goodbye. Lucas hugged her once more and ran to his father. Eduardo and Clara exchanged one final glance, brief, calm, full of gratitude. As they parted ways, there was no sorrow, only fullness, as if the story at last had found its ending. Hours later, when the school had emptied, Clara walked out into the garden. Dry leaves carpeted the ground, and the golden light of late afternoon softened the air. She sat on a bench and remained there, in silence. She thought of everything. The beginning, the pain, the comings and goings, and she realized that none of it had been in vain. Every loss, every waiting, every silence had shaped the woman who now breathed there, whole. She picked up a fallen flower and rolled it gently between her fingers. The wind blew softly like a whisper, and she understood then, fate had never been cruel, only patient. She rose, walked slowly to the gate, and before leaving, looked back. The garden was at peace. So was she. As she crossed the street, the city lights flickered on, and for the first time in a long time, Clara felt she owed nothing to the past, because the past, at last, had set her free. Some stories don't end with a kiss. They end with a calm gaze, a peaceful breath. Because love sometimes isn't what remains, it's what transforms. She was just the nanny, but she became something words could never define. The quietest memory of a time that, though brief, taught them both the meaning of what is true. And this time, she knew. It wasn't chance. It was destiny, disguised as silence. How many Claras have you known? Women who arrived to serve and ended up healing what they didn't even know was broken. Women who were silenced, misunderstood, judged, yet still walked with dignity. Maybe you've been one of them. Maybe you still are. Maybe you loved someone you couldn't have or learned too late that love isn't always what stays, but what teaches. Time doesn't return what's lost, but it reveals what endures. If this story touched you, if at any moment you saw yourself in Clara, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Because in every city, in every home, in every silence, there's always someone searching for what she found. The serenity to move forward, even when the heart still remembers. She was just the nanny, until the man of the house defended her in front of his wife. But in the end, it was she who learned to defend herself.